There's a lot of mechanics in TF2 that are simply not fun to fight against. You've got quickscope headshots, aka random bursts of skill, and the mere existence of weapons like the Wrangler. For every single unique mechanic or weapon in the game, odds are someone has complained about it at one point or another. And one of the best examples of this is one of the most divisive mechanics in the game, Pyro's notorious Airblast. On one side, you've got people wanting it to be removed, believing it punishes basic reactions and makes Pyro too powerful. And on the other end, you've got people who believe that Pyro would be unplayable without it. With how polarizing Airblast is, it got me thinking, what would happen to Pyro if Airblast was removed from TF2? Would it make Pyro the ultimate WM1 machine, or would it kill any reason to play the class? Well, let's find out. But first I would like to explain the basics of Airblast, since it's actually quite a varied mechanic. Airblast is a secondary attack used on every flamethrower except for the phlogistinator, with each taking a different amount of ammo to use, as well as the Dragon's Fury having a significantly slower cooldown. In action, Airblast serves to benefit Pyros and their team in both offensive and defensive ways, with the main uses being to 1. Reflect projectiles. This can be used to protect yourself, teammates, and even friendly engineered buildings, but they can also be shot right back into the enemy team for potentially catastrophic damage, which is complemented by the fact that reflected projectiles deal mini crit damage, because why not, right? You can also reflect rockets at your feet, allowing Pyro to be able to rocket jump, which can be quite effective at closing gaps, even though it's a pretty risky maneuver. Secondly would be to extinguish burning players. It's pretty self-explanatory, but one thing to note is that extinguishing players rewards you with 20 health, which is fascinating when other classes who can extinguish using their weapons receive such a weak reward. And arguably the most annoying to fight, number 3, juggling opponents around. The uses of this are basically endless. Whether you want to deny an uber push, protect your medic from an incoming bomb, or even save a clueless teammate from getting backstabbed, a lot can be done by blasting players away. So it's pretty clear that Airblast is one of Pyro's most versatile mechanics. But does that make it too good? Does it make Pyro an unbeatable, overpowered piece of shit that deserves to be rotting in the streets of Detroit? Well, in order to figure that out, I decided to play Pyro without being able to Airblast for 2 weeks. And you might be asking, why specifically 2 weeks? That's simply because I feel like an experiment like this requires a good amount of playtime in order to properly assess it later on. But I can't deny that this experiment isn't exactly perfect. For one, I did this all within casual servers where the skill of players isn't exactly consistent, plus I decided to do this with the phlogistinator since it cannot use Airblast, which hopefully means I can get at least a semi-realistic view into what Pyro would be like without Airblast. But without further ado, let's find out if Pyro actually needs Airblast. And so my pain and suffering begins. As I said in the intro, I'm going to be using the phlogistinator, but that's mainly because it does not have Airblast, which is interesting because it's the only flamethrower to have that downside. But to keep things fair, I'm not going to be using its critical alt fire. Because this experiment is mainly to see Pyro without Airblast entirely, it would only make sense to use the phlogistinator in this scenario as stock without Airblast. No more, no less. Other than that, it's going to be a basic generalist Pyro loadout, consisting of the detonator and power jack. As for cosmetics, let me get into something a little more comfortable. Yeah, I guess that works. But to go with this loadout, I'm gonna need a profile makeover. Funny taco. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. It's perfect. Well, I guess there's nothing to do but queue for casual. Oh dear. The thing is, when you don't have Airblast, you're really limited on your options. The only things you can really do are burn people with your flamethrower, shoot flares across the map, or use a shotgun, or whatever your preference is, and, you know, swing your melee. Other than that, you're basically a sitting duck to any class that has range higher than a fucking toothpick. Most of the time, you're gonna get countered by just, like, snipers, or engineers, or anything with hit scan. But the fact of the matter is, now... You beef it and just leave? Okay. Got it. So far, it's not that bad, though, from what I'm seeing. You know, maybe I haven't seen the worst of it yet. I surely haven't. But perhaps it's not... Perhaps Pyro doesn't need Airblast. Oh, come on, man! What the fuck? The first day without Airblast was... Interesting to say the least. I stupidly decided to play just as aggressively as I would normally, which resulted in a lot of easily avoidable deaths. But that's not to undermine the few times this aggressiveness actually managed to pay off, but those were mainly against some of the most unaware players I have ever seen. You see, the thing about Pyro is the flamethrower can only deal a semi-decent damage if you're within fucking sneezing distance. Any further and you're left to whatever your secondaries can deal, which won't be that much either. And if you even want to get somewhat close to your opponents, you have to maneuver very carefully as you have no means of defending yourself aside from simply dodging crosshairs. But then again, playing like Dookie is kinda expected when you're not used to handicapping yourself like this. And I do acknowledge that playing regular phlog is quite similar to what I'm doing, but having crits is a powerful way to mow down a crowd and can honestly be a real lifesaver. Just a shame I'm not using it, right? Whoa. Going into the second day, I was mainly looking to form a consistent strategy to both keep myself alive and land some picks. But with this learning process came a roller coaster of gameplay. In one life, I would be basically unstoppable, and then the next I would fall flat on my face. And this mainly came down to when I decided to go in. Since the flamethrower's DPS is reliant on how long someone is burning, it's optimal to only go in once opponents are focused on something else. I know it's a basic way to succeed with anything, but like, what options do I have exactly? But luckily, if I did get into a sticky situation, I still had one final trick up my sleeve. You see, the detonator is actually insanely helpful at being effective. Wish I knew that a while back. But seriously, the detonator provided movement potential that I desperately needed. Whether I was escaping death, getting to normally out-of-reach spots, or just dealing splash with some well-timed deaths, this secondary feels like it's playing quite a massive role in my performance going forward. I'm so dead, man. Oh my goodness! How did I dodge that?
I think we're just bullying them at this point.
Man, you think? Oh my god. 26 and 8, man. Maybe Pyro doesn't need Airblast. So you know how I said the detonator would be pretty helpful at doing well? Yeah, it was. Day number 3 was unique. For some reason, I was doing actually quite well. Regardless of the map or server I was playing on, I managed to get kill after kill after kill. But I don't really have an explanation for why I was doing well. I mean, I could be cocky and say I was improving, but like, come on. What most likely happened was just me getting into matches with literal zygotes. Buddy, are you lost? What the fuck was that? And I guess now would be a good time to emphasize just how important several unique sessions is to forming a proper conclusion. Because if I just based my thoughts on this singular session, 1, it would be about as weak as Texans when 1 whole inch of snow falls. And 2, where's the fun in suffering only once? You know I gotta milk that out. By the way, you see that subscribe button? Yeah, you do. You know what to do. Sorry, I have a gargoyle to grab. No! Even though this video is coming out long after Halloween, I'm recording this at the tail end of Scream Fortress. But why the fuck am I playing on Halloween maps? Well, I saw some people in a VC and I thought, juicy clouds. What? I'm a TF2 YouTuber. But what I was actually in for would be quite the goddamn ride. From dealing with the insanity of spells and the wenchless nature of cheaters, to having to listen to It's Fucking Raw complain about Engineer for what feels like an eternity.
There's something about Raw getting unreasonably angry that...
Unreasonable? You think this is People always say spy counters engineer because they're like Reddit brain and then like they can't deal with spies, so obviously spy is OP. Viewers at home, I'm not saying to dox him, but here's his full name and legal. It's dead. It's dead. Fuck you.
No, there's no...
Never mind, the engineer respawned, meaning that all of our efforts were invalidated because engineers are balanced class. I fucking hate engineers. I fucking hate engineers so much. It's unbelievable. Open gifts. Open gift.
As for my actual gameplay, I really do not have much of value to say. With how chaotic things get within Scream Fortress, it's utterly a miracle I managed to kill anything with this handicap present, but things would soon take a drastic turn. Why? Why is there a level 2 down here? I told you there was a sentry. I just fucking ran into it. What is our team doing? Entering day 5, I finally realized that maybe using the same secondary over and over again isn't that great for experimenting. So I made the tough decision to instead switch to the shotgun for my secondary. And it definitely took some getting used to, since I was restricted to whatever was possible with basic jumping. However, I still managed to pull through pretty well. Sure, my shotgun aim is absolutely pathetic, but at the very least it allowed me to focus more on my positioning rather than just flanking with the detonator. But something else happened in this session. I managed to get on a hefty kill streak during a random match of Badwater. Oh, poor guy. God, what the WM1, man? I'm 13-2 right now. This is ridiculous. Medic. Medic! Is your only purpose to pocket? This is getting scary. I've hit 15 now. Uh-oh. $18 now. Medic, let's do this. What is happening, man? I'm on a 22 fucking kill streak. What the fuck? Oh my god, what the fuck? I'm amazed I'm still kicking right now. Oh, okay. I got cocky. Fucking... The scout is relentless! The scout is relentless! Oh, no! Day 6 was certainly a much more grounded experience compared to the last session. I say that, but somehow my gamer juices flowed into this session because I went on another ridiculous kill streak. It wasn't godlike, but still baffling. But afterwards, things took a drastic turn of events. I kept getting into situations where I just simply couldn't do anything. I either couldn't get close to my opponents or was blocked off from parts of the map entirely, which is where the limitations of Pyro without detonator jumping really started to set in, simply because you're at mercy to design elements of whatever map you're playing on, and on some maps it's easy to flank or otherwise get close to the enemy. But on others, good luck, sport. But as much as that sucks to see, that's completely fine. Remember, I don't want to rely on these movement-oriented unlocks because that only covers a small portion of secondaries Pyro can use. What the fuck are you doing, Spy? What the fuck? What? Capping off the first week of my personal hell, day 7 was actually quite a calm session where nothing that special happened. Oh my god. That's a first. I mean, I did about as well as you may expect after doing the same thing for a week straight, but that's not exactly interesting to talk about time and time again. So instead, I feel like talking about good flamethrower technique since it's actually quite important while playing like this. Sure, you can waggle your flamethrower like a fucking Wii remote, but my man, that just ain't reliable. What I mainly try to do is lead my flames into my target, shooting where they will go rather than just right into their hitbox, which is complemented by flame particles being influenced by your speed and direction of movement. But why should you do this? Well, it boils down to particles dealing more damage the longer you're being hit by them. But of course, you're still within melee range, so if your opponent's sensors are functional, you can always try some careful strafing, which is especially useful against cocky demo knights. But no matter what happens, if you manage to play your cards right, you might just end up having a pretty beefy match. Yeah, I died 36 times. Bite me. For the first day of my second week, I decided to whip out Oh Reliable, just to attempt playing combo Pyro like this. And well, I did alright, but that's about it. Yeah, this was genuinely the least interesting session to play. I couldn't really do all that much with my combo weapons, since no matter what, it'd be better to just WM1. But maybe that's because I'm so used to playing combo Pyro with Airblast, but I wasn't gonna give up on it just yet. So unfortunately, I do not have much to say for day 9. I managed to play one match perfectly fine, but after that, my PC decided it would have a meltdown leading to some of the most headache-inducing gameplay I've ever attempted to endure. So that sucked. Let's just move on. Finally, we've reached double digits, and luckily, session number 10 was actually playable. No longer was I running into horrendous stutters every 2 seconds. Good jump! Holy shit, Cyber! What a jump! I watched that whole thing! But anyways, the derusting process for combo Pyro was very hit or miss without Airblast. I mean, I was certainly in a better groove than before, but as I've said many times now, there's only so much you can do, and that's made even more apparent when you're focusing on dealing damage through a gimmick. But it does make landing a shot feel so much better, while also making a miss hurt so much more. And trust me, you miss your shot while the entire enemy team is staring at you, yeah, it's over. In the pursuit of using different weapons, you can imagine that eventually the Scorch Out was going to be brought up. And I won't lie, using the Scorch Out made me feel dirty. Mainly because this was the first time I was able to just sit near my own team and still be effective with basic spamming. And while I was doing a bit of that while using the detonator, the Scorch Out requires way less effort since its flares explode on impact rather than when you choose to det. But it did feel weird to play this defensively when I really didn't have a reason to play like that. But all in all, the Scorch Out was just a pretty boring weapon to use for this, and I'd much rather use the detonator. Dispenser pick! Sorry, I had to. I've got a confession to make. The rest of these sessions were not recorded with the others. Instead, these last few sessions were recorded during the middle of December. Why? Because I was in a coma, suffering from the disease known as working retail on fucking Black Friday. But at least I'm now deciding to finish it, right? Anyways, number 12 was notable for a couple things. Number 1 being the new Smithmas maps, which I exclusively played on during this session. The issue about this is, of course, learning the layouts of the new maps. And with any new map, you get to play Where's Waldo on where health and ammo packs are, which can definitely cost you. Aside from that, I finally took it upon myself to use the man melter so that I could finally extinguish my teammates once again, which felt great. It felt like I could actually benefit my team to some degree, something that I could barely do while using everything else. Sure, I can't land man melter shots for the life of me, but it's still incredibly helpful to be able to extinguish teammates, especially in the environment where most other pyros just simply won't do that. I've been holding off on using these remaining weapons since I simply didn't think they would be helpful for what I was doing, but eventually they needed to be tackled. So first I decided to cross off the thermal thruster. And what can I honestly say about the thermal thruster? It just sucks. Sure, it's okay at traversing the map, but after that, why in the hell should I use it? You just cannot do anything of value without sacrificing yourself in the process, and honestly, that's not really worth it. In fact, I got so fed up with using the thermal thruster, I remembered that the panic attack existed. And my god, it felt amazing to do actual damage once again. Believe it or not, having an actual weapon for a secondary allows you to deal much better than having a glorified paperweight. But it's finally time to rip the band-aid off. Well, this is it. The final session of playing Pyro without Airblast. And I most certainly went out with a bang. Or rather, a coating of gas. I brought out what is most certainly Pyro's worst weapon, the gas passer. And what new could I get from whipping out this glorified water balloon? Because I sure as hell don't know. It's hard to explain, but using this weapon while handicapping yourself makes it basically impossible to do anything. At least the thermal thruster was able to close gaps. As for the gas passer, all I could do for damage with it is throw it and pray. And if your team can't take advantage of it, it's basically pointless. At least I was able to experience this one final session live on stream. Time to pat the Rouse. On my birthday, no less. But with that said, it is finally over. Well, that certainly sucked, but on a serious note, playing without Airblast was quite the goddamn ride. It was incredibly bizarre playing with a flamethrower that could only deal base DPS and nothing else, especially with just how mind-numbing it was to do over and over and over again. But of course, I did end up getting used to it. I mean, how could I not? It's really basic. And sure, doing such a thing may have regressed the remaining skill I had while playing the game, but I guess it was worth it, right? But that's not what you're here for. Do I think Pyro needs Airblast? The short answer, within casual at least, is no. But trust me, it's a lot more complicated than that, so let me break it down. TF2 itself is home to many walks of life, all of which have their own skill levels. But given that casual mode is the easiest way to play the game, there is certainly a higher amount of unaware players than anywhere else. And if you're going up against unaware players, you can honestly get away with just about anything. But for every kill I got, came at least one death to even things out. And that's because Pyro as a class gets put into a weird position without Airblast. Basically, every class can spam you out from afar, while you're only able to deal chip damage and or afterburn, which in all fairness is true for regular Pyro, but without Airblast there's even less you can do. Because on top of hit scan classes countering Pyro, projectile classes can now also counter Pyro, since your only real option is to hope you can dodge the splash or deal pathetic damage. This forces you to focus entirely on positioning, which turns you into a spy but without cloak or a disguise kit. All you can do is sneak up, hope you don't find a sentry and maybe land a kill, and very likely die afterwards. But let's face it, Pyro is not a good damage dealer thanks to the flamethrower being gradual and subject to ramp up. So what about Pyro's defensive uses? Well, here's the list of defensive things Pyro can do without Airblast, and here's the list with Airblast. Yeah, it's night and day. I felt like I had no reason to sit back and play defensively, so I always just ended up trying to get kills. Listen, I wasn't just gonna spy check for hours and hours. I have my limits, thank you. But I honestly believe you cannot do much defensively without Airblast. Think of all the projectiles I could have reflected, all the teammates I could have saved from dying to afterburn, or at least stopped from burning, as well as all the Ubers I could have prevented or otherwise weakened to some degree. So as much as getting a godlike kill streak was great and all, it doesn't change the fact that playing like this is incredibly one-dimensional and simply doesn't benefit the team. With that said, within casual settings, Pyro doesn't necessarily need Airblast. Sure, playing without it is boring as hell and is the bare minimum of what a class can do in a game like TF2. On top of the fact that the class benefits heavily from having it, the question wasn't about how good Airblast is, I was merely asking if a class like Pyro could still be playable without it. If you know the basics of TF2 or are a strict phlog main, you'd probably do just fine without Airblast. But I still believe Airblast makes the class at least a bit more interesting. However, in competitive settings, I do think it is necessary. Given that you're in environments where players are on their A game, Pyro needs to be able to reflect projectiles, attempt to deny Uber pushes, and occasionally extinguish teammates. Airblast is the sole reason Pyro can be competitively playable. But then again, I am not a comp player by any stretch of the imagination, so what would I know? But to give one concise answer outside of specific ways of playing the game, I do believe Pyro needs Airblast. It makes playing the class much more of an adrenaline rush, being able to just send back any projectile and deal damage with it, which regardless of its current balance makes Pyro an interesting class, and that's part of why I still play it, almost 6 years later. So what could I have done better? As I said, this experiment wasn't perfect, far from it in fact, so it would be good to at least look at my flaws for the sake of fairness. First of all, I could have recorded sessions better. Aside from the crappy OBS settings, I easily could have played for longer in some days, but I just didn't from being tired from work. That and actually trying to record them day after day, I ended up skipping days because I had no motivation to do this, especially with Black Friday and the holidays making me want to become a future alcoholic. Secondly was just focusing on variety. It sucked looking back at the first few sessions just using the detonator when most other weapons were only used once. Plus, I didn't even bother with melees. But then again, what was I honestly going to gain from most melees while playing without Airblast? And finally, I don't know if casual servers were the best way to tackle this, since let's be real, I was gonna do alright in casual servers no matter what. But either way, this was an interesting little experiment to do, and most certainly a change of pace compared to what I usually make. But it was fun, at least in some spots. It still sucked to do. In other news, I bought this weird fruit jelly thing. Here's my thoughts on it.
If the difference between winning and losing is a few stray pellets, you need to stop blaming your gun and start playing better.